telling Sarah, I'm like, I'm hearing these people give testimony because all my fucking life is right now is overhearing this goddamn court case for the last like 20 fucking years, and I'm sick of it. So I'm so glad it's fucking over. I'm so fucking glad.
I swear to God, if this ends up in a hung jury again, Matt might lose his mind.
No, I'm just canceling your phone plan.
Out for the.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another fun-filled episode of Mostly Harmless with Matt and Sarah. I'm Matt.
And I'm Sarah.
And together we're...
Mostly Harmless.
Another day, another time. We did not make it. I put together an entire road kit that has been pulled apart by TSA twice. And that's frustrating, but it is what it is. Batteries. No. Yeah. On that note, real quick, TSA is silly because they're like, oh, you can't have any batteries. I'm like, okay, but it's, they're like, oh, anything with batteries, the guy at the counter.
Oh, yeah.
It's got to be in your bag with you. I'm like, so let's not discuss the fact that it's still on the plane. It's just in a different spot on the plane. That's one silliness. Well, but then we're like, no, it's a digital camera. And he's like, oh, okay, that's fine. And then they still opened up the bag.
I did watch an episode of Air Disasters once where it was like a cargo plane full of lithium ion batteries.
Well, maybe not that many.
Tragedy ensued.
Maybe not that many.
Because
and wasn't there a point where
was called Air
Wasn't there a
Disasters.
point where Samsung Galaxies were exploding in people's pockets and stuff like that?
Or was it like vape pen or
it's
like
probably both.
E-cigarettes?
Couple of things to address before we begin. Listen.
Because to nobody's surprise, I'm just going to give the topic that we're going to talk about. And then you can come swoop in and say how I steamrolled this episode.
You just got lit
We
up.
needed the legal cup of coffee because we are putting our lawyer hats on. I was just boots on the ground in Boston. I visited the scene of the alleged crime. We're talking Karen Read because the defense has rested in the second trial of Karen Read, and there will be no prosecution rebuttal. We are going into, when this episode airs, closing arguments will be taking place. It has been a whole lot of fuckery the second time around, and we just spent a week in Boston. We were visiting family, and I was chit-chatting anyone's ear off about Karen Read, and I want to chit-chat with you guys. So that's the plan.
My tattoo artist knew about Karen Read. Lots of people knew about. But before we get to that nonsense.
Matt, how did I steamroll this episode?
Well, as always, Sarah, once again, you were thoughtless and did not think about our wonderful listeners who have made a bevy of requests that we have yet to address.
Yes.
So, in order of in no particular order of importance.
There is no order of importance. Everybody is important.
We plan to get to the couple of things we have going on. We have the
sexiest man in Winnipeg.
So here's the thing. I would appreciate.
Can't find that.
I would appreciate it if the person who requested that, which I'm hoping you're still listening and not upset that we haven't gotten to it yet, could send me a link to it, because I went to Prime Video and it says it's not available. Then I went to Apple and it said I couldn't buy it. So I'm gonna try again to see if I can find it. I might have to go get a VPN or something. But I'm extra interested because I can't find it.
Now it's elusive.
The other two things we have to talk about.
Sherry Papini.
And then there's that murder documentary. Don't Die. So we're going to get to those. Absolutely.
And then some more requests have come in,
I just got another one that I'm going to address right now. And then we will get to all these. We will be doing another episode this week. So we're going to record this one and put it up tomorrow. Obviously, this doesn't mean anything to you people. This
And
is a
then
little
the
bit
goal
behind
is to have another episode
from this
up
weekend.
on Monday for our regular scheduled programming.
Anyway, Stephanie S. coming at ya, right? Hello, Matt and Sarah. I love your podcast. I listen to it during my bedtime routine. Anyway, I was thinking you would be interested in the 3 Wives, 1 Husband documentary. It was on Netflix years ago. It's about another AUB community in Utah that lives in a carved out mountainside. That I'm into. It would be Sister Wives adjacent and possibly interesting for the show. Regards, Stephanie. And then a link to an IMDb. See that? Okay, I'll take that. And a link to an IMDb so I can actually click through.
Thank you,
now,
Stephanie.
Once again, I'm going to, where that's on the list, I actually have a spreadsheet. I don't have it yet. Well, I'm going to have a spreadsheet. And
It's like I'm doing this podcast with my mom.
we're going to get it.
She loves herself a spreadsheet.
We're going to get to it. But yes, please someone get me info on the sexiest man in Winnipeg because I am unable to find it. But I will do some now that I am back home because my plan was to get it on the plane or watch it somewhere and it was just unavailable for me. I'm going to do some further research. But that's it for now. Let's get into it.
We just spent a week in Boston. It was my first time back.
19.
Like 2020. I forgot. Yeah.
I know when my kid was born.
Yeah. It was February 2020. So it was right before the world shut down.
Yeah.
Wild. Yeah. So that was the last time I had been to Boston. So it had been some time, obviously. John O'Keefe, Karen Reed, that tragedy had not happened yet. So just to set the story up, because I have made a couple videos on Sarah Spills. We did a podcast episode when Karen Reed's retrial was starting. We kind of went over some of the details, but when you watch the trial and you watch the perceived shenanigans, I guess I'll say.
Chicanery.
Because to some of us, it's shenanigans. To other people, there is a huge contingent of people on Twitter that I guess you could call them the anti-Karen Reed. Like if I am the free Karen Reed contingent, these would be the anti-Karen Reed contingent. Like no matter what you say, they believe it would be absolutely outrageous for a police officer to plant evidence. It would be absolutely outrageous for there to be this blue wall of silence.
Oh, honey.
It would be absolutely outrageous for there to be corruption that goes all the way to the top, for all these people to partake in a conspiracy. It's just defies logic.
Those are the people I don't want voting in our elections.
When I went into this case, when I first got this case, right? That's what I thought.
Hold on. When this case came across my desk, I didn't think too much of it until I looked a little further, a little deeper, a little clearer.
I'm from Los Angeles. Obviously, we have our own history with police corruption, which has led to police brutality, riots, overhaul of... There's been dirty cops in the OJ case. Like, there's been a lot of history with that kind of naughty police behavior in Los Angeles. But when things like that happen, usually that police officer is made an example out of. Like, this person does not represent who we are, yada, yada, yada. And a house cleaning gets done, right? To make sure that things are on the, or at least as best they can be, on the up and up.
If you've ever seen the show The Rookie with Nathan Fillion, it actually addresses that on several different occasions about how there's they have to do a lot of positive press to make up for all the negative that happens.
And some people are just going to be, we don't believe that there's any like true blue, well-meaning cops out there. I don't buy that. I trust law. Let me back up. I want to trust law enforcement. I want to believe that when people take the oath and they get sworn in, it is to protect and serve. I want to believe that. Cases like Karen Read, and when you dive into and research all the areas that could be corrupt, like the legislature, the judicial system, the DA's office, like all the places it goes, it's unsettling, to put it mildly.
Well, it feels like a lot of people are covering their asses, as always, which is the number one thing of everyone everywhere, is to make sure you have no liability while ignoring a lot of things to keep that going.
So I know how I perceive law enforcement. If I were to need 911 here in Central Florida, I feel like I could call them and they would help me.
Well, you can always call them.
Right. I don't know if the residents of Canton, Massachusetts, given everything that has come out about the police officers, if they feel like if they found a dead body on their lawn, if they should maybe think twice about calling it in.
Well,
right?
The thing you have to look at when it comes to jobs like this is policemen, it's doctors, it's these big, grandiose jobs that have multiple facets to them that involve huge amounts of self-sacrifice in order to, go out and do what you need to do. Then you have to look at the people who are drawn to that kind of a job. So doctors, you do sometimes get the God complex people who it's like, I hold your life in my hands. Well, police, you get the fucking shot callers. You look at these people and you want me. I'm big supporter of the police. I love in general the police. That does not mean I don't think that there's a huge amount of retraining that needs to be done in multiple situations, but
we're pro police and we're also pro accountability.
Right, absolutely pro accountability.
So when there's a bad apple, absolutely call out the bad apple.
Well, and you have to look at it like this. Look at these are this biggest group of douchebags I've ever heard, especially with their fucking text messages that have been read out, the way that they talk to each other. And it just goes to prove that this is either or a combination of the big douchebag bullies in high school couldn't find a better job, decide to become cops, and are still, spoiler alert, big douchebag assholes, or the kids that were bullied by the big douchebag assholes who now have a chip on their shoulder, and then, spoiler alert, they become the big douchebag assholes with a badge. And that's not how it all works for a lot of people, but if you look at this, you look at townie cops, it's usually people who were just like, they need to prove something, or you have to go out and be like, well, like I'm the law now. And the text messages these fucking children were putting back and forth, that kind of stuff. I'm so happy that Proctor got shit canned. Like, you were talking like that on a fucking text thing with other cops and non-cops about police fucking business. Go fuck yourself. You're what's wrong with this fucking country in general.
So I guess in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, we're learning a whole shit ton about the way legal and judicial proceedings happen in Massachusetts. Everywhere, every jurisdiction has different rules, right? In Los Angeles, I know for sure it would not be uncommon or unheard of to bring in an expert to tell you, especially if your defense is what is called a Bowden defense, which is what Karen Read is really, that's her primary defense, is saying, hey, the police investigation was woefully inadequate. So let's bring in an expert to explain what should have been done. But in Massachusetts, that apparently isn't a thing. Apparently, a lay person should know what is and is not proper police procedure. But the problem is, and when you have a cop as bad, like literally as bad as Michael Proctor, when you have an investigation that defies logic, that yes, common sense, it doesn't seem like this was a good investigation. But then you have every single law enforcement official that gets on the stand saying, this was great. This investigation was done with honor and integrity.
How the fuck you could say that
Then-
when you're collecting evidence in fucking Stop and Shop bags and Solo cups?
Then I think, no, you need to bring in an expert to say, no, this actually is not, because yes, if Michael Proctor was LAPD would have hung him out to dry.
I'm
They would
surprised
be
that Boston
Mariah
didn't.
Carey. I don't know her about Michael Proctor. But in Massachusetts, in the MSP, in all of the law, those text messages were juvenile. They were unfortunate, but that didn't affect this investigation. Then we have this cop Gallagher who was, I had no need to want to investigate the house. Why would I? Using a Stop and Shop bag. What's wrong with that? That was great. Think it on your toes.
No, and that's what I'm
Using
telling,
a leaf blower. Innovative.
I'm telling Sarah, I'm like, I'm hearing these people give testimony because all my fucking life is right now is overhearing this goddamn court case for the last like 20 fucking years, and I'm sick of it. So I'm so glad it's fucking over. I'm so fucking glad.
I swear to God, if this ends up in a hung jury again,
if this
Matt might lose his
no,
mind.
I'm just canceling your phone plan.
Canceling. You can't cancel my YouTube subscription because that pays the bills.
I can do what I want. Yeah, hey, listen, you are in charge of
You better
lighting.
tell Peter Tragos, that lawyer you know, and Emily D. Baker.
You're the one who's holding the match next to the fuse. It's up to you. So I'm telling her, I'm like, at what point has anyone been like, because they ask the questions. What is basically is that them saying like, what is 1 + 1? And then they're being, and maybe I don't know enough about how investigations should, or how the like court and cross-examination should work, but they'll just be like, can you explain to me what kind of a day it was? And they're like, oh, it was a sunny day. Sunny day. What does sunny mean? Explain sunny. And you said the word day. What does day mean in this? And so I'm like, so they're going into this minutia of phrasing, which is just annoying, but I get it. But it's really stupid because it's like, we all know what you're saying. Like, you don't have to be like, well, if we don't say it right, then someone's going to get off on charges. It's like, no, shut up. But they're literally like talking all this stuff. And I'm like, at what point does someone say, well, yeah, that's a great question for if the evidence people actually collected evidence in a way that was becoming of a fucking 5-year-old cleaning their room at best. Like the way that they did the evidence in this thing and then expecting to get any kind of real results from it. Like, oh, but we got it. We had the Solo cups from the party that we were all at before because we were all getting fucking wasted and then came to work like we like to do. And then, when the snow was there, we figured we'd use the leaf blowers to clear it away because that wouldn't have harmed any evidence. And yet somehow using leaf blowers and your Solo cups and completely mishandling this crime scene, you are magically able to find every possible shred of a taillight that was somehow maybe possibly broken.
Right.
Like you literally used leaf blowers and didn't even think to hold evidence anywhere else, but we have found 765 shards out of this fucking taillight. It's like, you could perfectly rebuild this taillight, even though they've done no evidence handling from how I've seen it. And they're like, no, there's no way that this is a railroad job. There's no way. There's just no way.
So you guys, true boots on the ground. I truly did the bare minimum, but all in the name of journalism. So
Did you get your souvenir taillight piece?
Well, so I jotted down the cities that we frequented during, or actually stopped by in. And Matt is from this area. We talked to family, we talked to friends. I chit-chatted with everybody. So we were in Boston proper, the city. We stayed in Hull. We were in Quincy, Braintree, Marshfield, Taunton, Salem, and where does Uncle, I don't want to dox him, but what city does Uncle
Weymouth.
Bill? Weymouth.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is all pretty close to Canton. And I actually visited the scene. Actually, you have a friend who works in Canton and has, I don't want to like out people's jobs and stuff. So I'm trying to be careful. But
That's right, everyone. I have a friend who has a job.
I just want to put out there that we talked to a bunch of people from a bunch of different places, all from the suburbs. What is that, South Boston?
It's the South Shore.
South Shore. Not one person that I talked to thought that she was likely guilty. Not one.
That's why I find it surprising that you said that there's camps of people who are like, yeah, absolutely.
And that was what was interesting to me, because I was like, am I just in an echo chamber where I'm just surrounding myself? You know, I have obviously bought into this conspiracy theory.
I told you, I'm going to hang the audio paneling.
And I am looking for my confirmation group, you know, people who think like me. And it's been a bit jarring going on. The biggest contingent of anti-Karen Read people that I have seen has been on Twitter, X, whatever you call it. So I'm like, am I just a keyboard warrior? Like, what do people in the area actually think about? I was so fascinated to get what the locals really think of this case. And I was very surprised that because whatever is a 100% statistic. Now, do I think 100% of the people of Canton or South Boston think that she's innocent? No. But we talked to a bunch of people from a bunch of different ways of life, bunch of different types of jobs, and they all thought that she was innocent, that she didn't do it. Also, proposing then that in order for her to get convicted, this would have to be a setup by the government of Massachusetts. 100% of the people that I talked to thought that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts was absolutely capable of a frame job.
I mean, I think any governmental body is capable of that.
Yeah, but you would think, again, I'm going off of my background coming from Los Angeles. There are whistleblowers in Los Angeles that would not roll over on this type of situation.
Well, but you also have to see who actually has access to the conspiracy. So in the world of conspiracies.
And I'm sure someone will be like, I also live in Los Angeles. So I 100% believe Los Angeles is capable of this too. That might be true. But I just, from what I know in my, growing up in the 90s in LA, I just think that someone would have rolled by now if this was Los Angeles.
Well, but you're acting like everyone in the government is sitting around a campfire coming up with this tale. What I was saying about conspiracy theories is they're as good as the weak links in the chain that they're provided. It only takes a few people in power and a few people that are on the powerless side to make a conspiracy theory, a conspiracy work. Because the more people who are in on a conspiracy, the less it's a conspiracy, and it's just a bad railroad job. In this situation, all the people who have gone up and testified, positive or negative, doesn't necessarily mean they're all in on the joke. You know what I mean? It's if there were everybody who was participating in this trial was privy to all of the information, we wouldn't need to have a trial. It's all individuals and what we have to do. And the more you separate people and more you keep different people from knowing certain information, the easier it is to make it so that everything functions in some sort of homeostasis. And and that's the thing, because you're like, oh, there's no way that someone wouldn't call the whistle on this. Well, I think about that, especially in larger government, even as far up as the White House, where it's like when you're questioning things and you're like, this seems like something that someone would have to be like, oh, aliens exist. You know what I mean? Like some of that nonsense where it's like any of those larger conspiracies. If someone found out even the smallest, so someone would definitely do it, but people want to keep their jobs. Whistleblowing does not pay money. So if someone was like, hey, I could blow the whistle on this, I might get 15 minutes of YouTube fame and then I am out of a job, because in most situations, even if you're blowing the whistle, you're still probably violating a number of non-disclosure agreements. And you leaked that secret. Yeah, we might have been doing bad things there, but now how do we know that you're not going to leak other government secrets? And so stuff like that, it's just as simple as keeping people dumb.
There was this officer that testified this time around, the second time around, who did not testify in the first trial. She was begrudgingly called by the defense. She did not.
Wasn't she really angry?
Yeah, she did not want to be there. Basically, she was Canton PD when this incident happened. Now she works for Boston PD. Her name was like Kelly Dever or something. I think Dever was the last name. I could be getting the first name wrong.
It's probably Deva.
Anyways, the story with her is when she was working the night shift when this went down and the call came in. And people are scurrying around trying to get deployed to 34 Fairview. I actually drove from Canton PD to 34 Fairview. It takes 5 minutes at best. That would be the longest if you hit every light, which is like 2 between there and 34 Fairview. And when I went, it was raining. So it was, it wasn't a blizzard.
It was a blizzard.
But it wasn't 90 degrees and sunny out either. So there was a bit of weather to deal with. And I swear it took me 3 minutes. But I'll err on the side of caution and let's say 3 to 5 minutes. There's a couple things there that I want to talk about. So first, people are scurrying around. They deploy officers to 34 Fairview. This officer, Kelly Dever, I'll just say Officer Dever because I don't know if her first name is Kelly, but Officer Dever takes over the dispatch desk. And in Canton PD, so apparently she has access to all these cameras. She has access. She could see people coming in and out because of like either windows or glass or whatever. I'll put up a picture of what I took a picture of Canton PD looking like. And it's a building with a lot of windows. Sometime in 2023, Officer Dever was interviewed by the FBI.
Okay.
Because she was manning the dispatch desk.
Manning.
Well, like, what did you see? What happened? Can we get your take? And also preface this by saying it's a crime to lie to the FBI. Like Sherry Papini went to jail for lying to the FBI.
I'm a little Papini.
So don't do that, basically.
No, don't get caught.
Well, so at this point, I think it's August 2023, she tells the FBI, yeah, I think it was Brian Higgins, was one of the people at the party, also an ATF agent that had a office in Canton, comes back to the Canton PD at like 2:00 in the morning to move cars. Makes no sense. She saw him and the chief of police in the Sallyport, which is where they store their cars, which would have been where Karen Reed's car was towed, for a like wickedly long period of time.
Wickedly long?
Something like that. Like that's what she told the FBI. Apparently, then she gets called to the like police commissioner's office. She then recants her testimony because it was a false memory that she conjured, she realized, because the car did not get delivered to the Sallyport until like 5:30 that night. She clocked out of her shift supposedly at like 3:45.
Wasn't that like that?
So she could not have actually been there to witness that. Not saying that just because, and we don't even talk about the fact that just because you clock out doesn't mean you leave, or did you clock out and then did you start a shift? And not to mention the whole, I'm pretty sure the whole reason why the FBI even has its eyes on Massachusetts to begin with is things like this big overtime scam from a couple years ago that government employees were perpetrating. Anyways.
It's a conspiracy.
Just because your shift ends or you clock out, I don't think that necessarily means that means you left. If they needed her memory to be false, her testimony to be false, what better way than to say you could not have possibly witnessed that because you weren't here, right? You weren't here, right?
Right. Yeah, but what I'm saying, you asked me like if people would stick around after their job's over. No, they would not. I don't know a person who would. I'm confused how that tracks to what we were just talking about.
See, for me, and this is interesting. It's interesting to have this conversation because to me, if a fellow police officer is involved in whatever like goings on is currently happening in the police department that you're working at, and it's all hands on deck, maybe you would stick around.
I don't know.
What I'm insinuating here is that I think that she probably did witness what she said she witnessed originally. And I think the powers that be made it so it wouldn't be possible for her to have witnessed what she witnessed by simply changing her schedule.
You're knocking on the conspiracy door.
And then, because she even says on the stand, my livelihood depends on my testimony here today, then yeah, if you're faced with, I'm going to be out of a job if I don't toe the line.
Well, I'm not sure I track with that logical progression either. I feel like her livelihood depends on her testimony, because if she can't be a reliable person to give testimony,
well, she's not now,
right? But I'm like, if
anyone calls her to testify and it's like, oh, weren't you the one who made up some wild story about seeing two people you factually could not have seen given your alleged clock out time?
Yeah, I guess she fucked herself over on that. But yeah, she had conflicting testimony. I don't know how she could still be working there if she is working in law enforcement.
She's not a reliable witness to any.
So then why, like,
you can't take her at her word for anything.
Yeah, I would not continue to employ something
unless
like
she's
that,
literally wearing a body cam at all times, you can't take her at her word.
Yeah, I would get rid of her.
Because she has said as much.
I certainly wouldn't give her a raise. So, yeah.
So that's just an example of officers admitting on the stand, hey, my livelihood depends
contingent on my testimony,
on how this goes.
Yeah, I think this thing is toe up from the flow up with
the absolute wild thing. And another thing I appreciate about the time we spent this past week is that we did quite a bit of driving around the various cities. We got I was unfamiliar with the traffic. I didn't grow up in Boston. I didn't grow up in the South Shore. That was worse
than I remember it being.
So but the rotaries, all the one-way streets, all the tiny streets that and these sidewalks that are like, I think they're called berms, where it's like the sidewalk melds into the street. It's not like a sidewalk and then the street. It's like a kind of graduation of, you know what I mean?
I'm not familiar with the term, but yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
So it's things that I am not used to from where I grew up.
It's because the history swallows the city whole.
Yeah, it's and like we've talked about, Boston is a unique city. It's not the only city like this in the country, but it's a city, one of the first cities in the country where the transit and city planning was done after the city was settled.
Yeah.
So that's why a lot of stuff makes no sense.
The comparison between Boston and New York is fairly simple when it comes to driving. New York, they designed the grid and then they built the city into it. And in Boston, the city was built and they built the roads around it.
Well, and that's the weird thing to me, because New York absolutely existed before cars and
No, but
like
I think the city planning was like, here's what
there
our
was some-
overarching.
the pilgrims
Boston
did it.
was just like,
Yeah.
this boat's now a house.
Yeah.
Like,
In Boston, they were like, it's cold. Where I fits, I sit.
There was a friend's house that I went to a lot when I was working at a Mexican restaurant a million years ago around there. And the house in the basement, the house was built out of a boat that had sailed, and the mast was the main support. And it was really cool.
That is so Boston.
Yeah, it was cool.
The culture of Boston. Let's talk about that for a second. The culture of, I guess, the South Shore, all of the admitted drinking and driving in this case is kind of mind-boggling.
Well, it's definitely part of the fabric of the city.
The amount of law enforcement that admitted to like getting tanked and then getting behind the wheel. John O'Keefe, rest in peace, was consuming alcohol out of a glass while in a moving vehicle.
It's just part of that society out there. And it is true. If you're not, you know, there's a lot of people that just, you know, that's part of it. You just, hey, what are you doing? We're all drinking this weekend. Where are we going? I knew I could throw a rock and hit somebody I knew that had at least one DUI under their belt. And so they give them out. But they also, there's this relaxed attitude about drinking and driving until something bad happens. Then it flares up. So let's say someone drinks and drives and hits a car and there's a fatality of some kind, right? Then it's drinking and driving. It's the bad. It's the worst thing. Everyone's getting DWIs. Blah, blah, blah. And then 6 months, it just kind of tapers off. Well, the culture's gone down. No one really caring about this shit right now. Let's stop. Oh, God, the paperwork. I don't want to fucking do the paperwork. You know, and then they're required to show up in court, which half of them don't want to fucking. They used to say when I started driving, like, if you got any kind of a ticket, whether you were a speeding ticket or otherwise, doesn't matter if you were guilty of it, fight it and go to court, because if the cop doesn't appear in court, you most likely are going to get off because they're not there to speak to whether you did it or not. And most of the time the cops didn't fucking show up to court because, you know, I mean, obviously for their job, they would be able to do it. It's not like, I couldn't come to court. I had to work. Well, that's your job, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, it's odd. And it's, you know, talk to people around there. It's just drinking and driving seems to be and I'm assuming I haven't been back. I haven't lived there in many, many years now, but the culture doesn't seem to have changed too much based on how this investigation seems to be going.
Yeah, that was kind of shocking to me, because that is not the way law enforcement was. Not that I had a lot of interaction with law enforcement when I was a youth. Growing up in Los Angeles, but I certainly would not have ever expected that I could just have an open container and drive my cop boyfriend around town, and that would be like A-okay, or that we would all look around and go, who's the least drunk, and like have that person
that
drive.
Conversation has happened. I've been a party to that conversation before, and it really what you're saying is like the day to day, not the day to day, but
I think it's insightful to have conversations with someone like you who is from the area, also talking to locals and getting an idea and getting a grasp on just how prevalent and pervasive that really is in South Boston. It's wild. We
go to karaoke every Thursday, right? Mm-hmm. You know, you have a few or you don't, whatever. And so, you know, we're all drinking and it was me, and I had driven like 4 people there, and we all had to leave. And, you know, I didn't feel capable of driving, you know, and neither did a couple other, but we did play the who was the most able to drive game. And the girl who she actually hadn't really, I think she maybe had a beer or two, which again, you know, no amount of alcohol in this situation is okay. But, she was, you know, she probably would have blown under the legal limit anyways. But she sucked at fucking driving because she drives and she blows my tire out and takes a curb off. And now I'm changing a tire in the middle of the night, drunk, while you know, we picked the sober person to drive home. And I'm like, well, you know, I was pretty sober once I was done changing that tire. I'll tell you what.
So the other thing I wanted to touch on was, so I make this pilgrimage to Canton. Matt's getting his souvenir tattoo because he absolutely did not want to be part of
I had no interest in that.
My true boots on the ground. No. But I wanted to see, because obviously, you know, it's one thing to see pictures of the scene, and we've obviously heard the evidence about the flagpole and parking on the street and her backing up, going 24 miles an hour, backing up 80 something feet. And I just wanted to see, because, you know, I didn't make a special trip like to Boston to do this, but since we were already there, I figured, you know, you're going to be doing your tattoo. Kids like to nap in the car. We'll just do a little jaunt. And I made sure, because I want people to know that I'm not a trespasser onto private property. All I did was drive by. I did not stop. I did not get out of my car. I just saw the scene from what is publicly accessible, which is the street.
Good for you.
Little disclaimer there. With that being said, the front lawn is much smaller. I'll put up a picture. Is much smaller than I perceived in pictures that I had previously seen. And driving there, it is literally like 3 to 5 minutes from the Canton police station. So knowing what has been recounted about the night, there are things that just don't make sense.
Well, let me ask you a question, though, because we're talking about Trooper Proctor, ex-Trooper Proctor, and the troopers. The Stadies don't exist out of the Canton police station. They come out of the state troopers, the highway patrol and stuff like that. They have a different police station.
Right, but they come in to investigate murders. So they did the Stadies, and I didn't know that that's
the Stadies.
The colloquialism for MSP, but yeah, they come in.
They would have never heard them referred to as MSP.
So they come in once there's been a homicide deemed. So really, they didn't get on the scene until John O'Keefe was declared dead at the hospital. So initially, this was Canton PD that was received the 911 call, got dispatched, and did the initial investigation. So all of this is happening 3 to 5 minutes from headquarters. And instead of driving back to headquarters to get evidence bags,
I'm surprised
they retrieve solo cups and leaf blowers.
How did they have those
from
things?
The neighbors?
Okay,
from neighbors. And it's like they intentionally tried to do the very least. And I have a theory as to why, but we'll table that for just a second. So, seeing in person how closely Canton PD is to this house, it really is absurd that nobody was like, hey, I don't have an evidence bag in here. Let me just pop on over because I'm a fucking cop and I can like do things like put sirens on and
I
like,
would be
like
interested
go
to,
through lights and stuff and zip there and zip back.
I would be interested to wonder as to why they didn't have evidence bags. Like,
Yeah.
It's your
so
fucking
their
job?
their excuses at first was we're Canton PD. We don't investigate murders. That's Massachusetts State Police.
and murders are the only thing that have evidence.
But it's like right. It's like as if they never investigated a crime.
Well,
period.
so if you get pulled over and you got a dime bag in your pocket, they don't just throw it in a fucking Solo cup. It goes into an evidence
Right,
bag. When you get
exactly,
arrested, your
exactly,
clothes, your
exactly.
belongings, like even if they just had big fucking evidence bags and not little fucking baggies, there's no reason that they didn't have it.
Exactly.
It makes me wonder if they had it, they just decided not to use it.
My theory on this is that I personally think that because the other thing is just from seeing the scene myself, and it's a very quiet neighborhood, it's a very quiet street, a street that you can hear a pin drop. There's no like freeway going by, there's no airport nearby. It's very quiet.
There is a lot of quiet.
It is impossible for me to believe that all of the people in the house were completely oblivious to the commotion going on when a dead cop is found on their lawn at 6:00 in the morning. And one of the people inside the house is a cop himself, same department, and doesn't go out to like just be curious.
Well, I mean, are we taking into
Let
account...
alone say, hey, I'm a first responder. You guys need some blankets or something? I know CPR.
Are you taking into account the fact that all these fucking assholes were wasted?
Well, what I'm saying is I don't believe that the people inside the house didn't know what was happening outside of the house. So that leads me to, because in the first trial, this didn't come in the second trial, but in the first trial, we learn that the homeowner, Brian Albert, and this Brian Higgins, who is an ATF agent and had a satellite office out of Canton PD, they were both at the house, and they were at all of the bars that the group had gone to the night leading up to going to the house. And we find out that the day before a preservation order comes down, or because I think the preservation order ends up getting denied, but when word of a preservation order gets disseminated, and they think it could be possible that they get ordered to hand over their phones, both Brian Albert and Brian Higgins destroy their phones.
Yeah.
And Brian Higgins does it in a fashion where he destroys his SIM card in one location, and then he discards his cell phone in another location. One of the locations being a military base where the trash doesn't just get picked up
Gets
by the local.
incinerated, right? So I and this is from watching The Rookie, but it's a very accurate cop show. There was an episode where this kid was a rookie, believe it or not. And he just kept making up these wild stories about all kinds of things like, oh, you know, like my cancer is back and this, like, you know, and it just, you know, all, you know, at first you're like, okay, great. And then people started kind of looking at him sideways, and, you know, he completely recovered from cancer. And then he was about to get fired, one of the people was about to come out and be like, hey, he's a lying sack of shit. And he's like, oh, my cancer's back. Oh, but I can still work. And it kind of went off to the wayside. Well, the cop was like, I need you to submit to a blood test so that we can prove your diagnosis, because it sounds fake. It doesn't sound like the evidence supports it, and we need you to do a blood test. And he's like, no, I don't want to do it. And he's like, if you refuse the blood test, you're a rookie, right? You are no longer a member of the police department. When you're a part, at least in the rookie side of it, when you're a rookie, if they ask you to do something and you don't do it, that's the end of your tenure as a police officer for the most part. But if I find it odd, are these people who destroyed their phones still employed?
So Brian Higgins, yes, he is. Brian Albert retired.
Okay, probably a forced retirement, but
Or probably
maybe not.
saw, I don't know. Yeah.
I'm sorry. You're telling me that you are what is going to be considered to be, we choose you to represent us as, you're a cop, you're the best of us, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. Yet when asked to do something, you went out of your way to fucking destroy your phone.
Yeah.
To destroy your phone. Not like, even if you said, oh, it fell in the river. Now, because, okay, I guess we'll dredge the river. That probably would have been most likely the end of that conversation. But no, you literally went out of your way to destroy evidence.
So
how are they still employed after that?
Okay, so this is what I think.
Because it was like no question that these phones were purposefully damaged and destroyed to prevent them from being read.
I mean,
well, that's what we can infer is that part. But like, they weren't accidentally SIM card here, incinerator here.
Neither one of these guys said, I destroyed my phone to circumvent the preservation order.
What did they say?
I think Brian Albert said he was upgrading his phone.
So in the chaos of upgrading, I decided to.
And then I don't remember what Brian Higgins' excuse was. Brian Higgins was the more wild tale because he had the military base dump off of half of it and then discarded the other half. So I think that what happened to John O'Keefe that night was a tragic accident that involved way too much drinking. I don't know how he came to sustain the head injury that he got that ultimately is what killed him. But I do think that it was initially a tragic accident. That's just my personal feeling.
Well, I mean, the amount of people that slip on ice.
I think nefarious things, that word has come up a lot in this trial, but I do think that illegal nefarious happenings were going on. I think there was evidence of that on Brian Albert and Brian Higgins' phone. I think that they all panicked when something happened to John O'Keefe. And I think that they initially were going to blame whatever happened to him as him getting hit by a snowplow.
Right.
I think that was the initial plan, and that's why they drug him out to the street. Then Karen Reed comes wailing in, frantic, still drunk, saying, did I hit him? Could I have hit him? I dropped him off here. He was fine when I left, and they were like,
scapegoat found.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know. My thing is just circling back to the fucking two cops that destroyed their phones. Even the perception of corruption in law enforcement and above should be the end of it. Like, if you can't offer up to me a genuine, like, oh, I'm upgrading my phone, so I went to the most wildly obscure things. It just happens to coincide with 15 minutes after being asked to surrender my phone.
You can't just access a military base. Like, nope. I can't just go onto a military base. Brian Higgins did because he's a vet.
Yeah. It's just like, that's the kind of stuff where it's like, yep, there's corruption, but if you're even perceived to be corrupt, there has to be consequences on that. Because my biggest thing is, what is it? If you sit in a barbershop long enough, you're going to get a haircut.
And yet, all of these law enforcement officers that are testifying are saying that this investigation, solo cups, leaf blowers, not going into the house, not interviewing people for years, sometimes years later. all of this investigation was done with honor and integrity.
It's bullshit. And it's just a big fat stack of like, I say this a lot of it's like, if you are getting accused of a crime, right, and you are 100% innocent, then, right, you don't have anything to worry about, right, whatever. But like, when it's like, oh, we're looking at these people, generally there is enough evidence, circumstantial or otherwise, to say that you're worth being looked at. And that alone is enough to be like, okay, there's no reason a cop should be being at, like, I need your phone. I'm your boss. I need your phone. Here you go. At worst case, I write about leaky balloon knots like a fucking 5-year-old, Trooper Proctor, but his phone was still around and he's just a giant boys club. It's surprising to me that these people with that, just, I don't know, that just rubs me the wrong way. This whole like, my phone, oh, I don't have it anymore. Like even losing it, you know what I mean? Because like you're going to an extreme measure to protect the phone from being put out there. Like, even if your phone has no evidence of this crime, there's another crime on that phone that you are not showing.
Exactly.
Like,
and
so,
that's
okay,
what I think
you have nothing to do with the Karen Reed thing. That's fine. But all this other things on this phone that you're afraid are going to come to light, this is your, I'm assuming, your work issue cell phone or are they private cell phones?
So they all had work issued cell phones.
Because I know police get a cell phone from the department.
Proctor had both of his cell phones extracted.
Yeah, but listen, guy's a douchebag, fucking through and through. Biggest piece of shit the way I've heard.
With law enforcement, when you conduct work on your personal becomes your work phone.
Right, because you're
they
using
no longer
it.
make a distinction.
Right.
So if you're talking shop on your personal, now that's a work
and that's
cell
what.
phone.
Listen, guy's a big piece of shit. I
Yeah.
get it, but his phone was, and his horrifyingly juvenile text messages were read for fucking filth in front of everyone, and yet these two fucking upstanding citizens' phones were too volatile. This is my opinion, to be publicly disclosed.
Well, we couldn't, because they destroyed their phones, we'll never know what was.
But it's
what was
like,
on them.
again, there's a lot of things that don't add up on that to me. And in my world, you want to clean up the departments. Anyone who, when asked to do something, magically doesn't have oh, your phone's gone. I just asked you for it like yesterday.
So none of that came in this second trial because, and I think rightfully so, the defense made the decision to really just go after the science, the physics of
they're talking about this arm a lot.
What the Commonwealth alleged happened, and to disprove that, or to just say, hey, there's not enough evidence to say what happened to John O'Keefe that night. And since there's not enough evidence, you can't convict Karen Reed. So where we're at now in the trial is the defense really has focused with this retrial in this thing called the Bowden defense, which is basically saying that the investigation was so inadequate that you can't convict her, which I think there's a lot of credence there. And they haven't focused on this third party culprit and trying to point the finger so much at these other people. So we haven't heard of the destroying of phones and things like that. What will be interesting, because now the defense has rested, the Commonwealth has said there's not going to be a rebuttal. The last witnesses for the defense really were strong, and they really hammered home. It doesn't matter how fast Karen Reed's car was going. It doesn't matter the position of John's body. The X, Y, and Z don't matter, because the evidence that we have does not coincide with John O'Keefe getting hit by Karen Reed's car.
Right.
And that is the case. If you can't say that happened, she is not guilty.
I wonder if this is going to come up in like law textbooks.
I'm sure it will.
Like, here's how not to do a fucking case. Like,
and I wonder if there's going to be changes in Massachusetts law. Like, can you now bring in outside people, law enforcement people, to tell you, to testify?
Isn't that what an expert witness is supposed to be?
Yeah, but apparently, because that's not really a thing in Massachusetts, this judge said, nah.
So, like, my buddy Bob could just come in and just be like, hey.
No.
Or nobody can come in.
Nobody can come in. You
Sorry,
take
Bob.
what the police say, and it should be obvious to you whether they're full of shit or not.
It is obvious to me.
Yeah, but I think it would really drive the point home, especially if you are inclined to just believe law enforcement's always going to do the right thing.
It'd be nice.
If you're the type of person that's inclined to believe that, and you have a cop on the stand saying, yeah, it's not the most ideal situation, but we used a leaf blower. How innovative was that? That's literally what one cop said. And if you're like, yeah, they did do the best with what they could in this blizzard. If someone is telling you how great of a job they did and you're inclined to just believe cops, then you don't know that this was not how a normal police investigation is supposed to go.
Right.
So now we're done. We're done with evidence. We need tomorrow, when this goes out, this episode, we will be in closing statements, and the judge has indicated that she wants the jury to start deliberating tomorrow. Last time they deliberated for like 5 or 6 days, and ultimately came back multiple times saying that they were at an impasse. And then finally the judge declared a mistrial. So it'll be interesting to see. To me, I think that the defense's last witness, especially Dr. Rentschler, proved that the science, it defies science, what the Commonwealth is alleging
this case defies
happened.
logic.
So to me, this should be a relatively easy not guilty, but obviously, because I would not make a good juror in this case because I know way too much about it. Obviously, like, we don't know what the jury is thinking and seeing and how they're perceiving the defense and how they're perceiving the prosecution, and it's terrifying.
All I know is that I'm going to flat out, if I ever get called for jury duty again, I am just going to be like, there's no world where I can hear someone say evidence and then someone just yells objection, and then they say stricken from the record, please disregard that. I'm like, how the fuck am I going to disregard the smoking gun that you just put away because it was phrased incorrect? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's like the stuff that there's no way. I just feel like on a human level, they're not robots. Like, if they hear like, we got this person to confess, but we didn't do it the right way. Objection, Your Honor. We can't talk about that. We already okay. Sorry, guys. I mean, we basically just won this case, but please disregard.
Yeah.
You know, like, because there's been stuff I've heard objections to where they're like, please disregard that. And I'm like, how can you disregard that?
Yeah.
Like, especially when a lot of this comes down to a public, like, speaks to people's character. I'm like, well, you're asking me to disregard something that directly relates to this person's character.
Well, as Emily D. Baker says, shit's out of the horse. So we will see how closing arguments go tomorrow. If there's another mistrial, hopefully not. Hopefully there's resolution here for Karen and her family. And the saddest part of all of this is that I do not believe that there is enough evidence to conclusively say that Karen Read backed up into John O'Keefe, and that is what the Commonwealth is alleging. Therefore, I feel like the right thing to do is to find her not guilty. With that being said, being that this is the second time that the Commonwealth has tried to convict her of John O'Keefe's murder, if she is acquitted, again, the law tubers that I follow have said the Commonwealth is not going to continue to investigate this case.
Right.
So therefore, if Karen Read, I don't think Karen Read getting convicted would be justice for John O'Keefe, because I don't believe that she killed him. Certainly not in the manner that the Commonwealth is alleging.
They're pushing. Yeah.
Right. So I don't believe that that would be justice. But especially if she gets acquitted, John O'Keefe's death will never get justice.
No.
And that is very tragic.
Yep.
And so I'll be chit-chatting on my Facebook, on my Instagram.
Keeping us posted.
I'll be sharing my thoughts for anyone who cares what I think.
People care. We all care.
But anyways, you guys, make sure you check us out on all the socials at Do Mostly No Harm.
Do Mostly No Harm. Head on over to the website, www.level42studios.com. Head on over to the contact page and drop us a line. Many, many people have been using that.
And we will have an episode out on Monday.
Yep.
So
That's what we do. That's
Stay
it.
tuned.
We got to go. Got to get going. Thanks for coming around. And as always,
do mostly.
no harm.
Have a good one, you guys.